Harriet Lowe understood what most people never understand about the parables of Jesus, when a fake wooden door on the community theater stage would not open from the outside. The actor playing the respectable brother refused to come in, and a homeless man sitting alone in the back row whispered, "Maybe the story was never about who looks lost. Maybe it was about who will enter when grace throws a feast." The theater smelled of dust, old velvet, sawdust, and nerves. It had been built in a better decade by people who believed every small town needed a stage, a curtain, and at least one room where ordinary citizens could pretend to be kings, farmers, widows, servants, fools, and saints without being arrested. The seats were red, though time had faded them toward tired brown. The stage floor creaked. The spotlight buzzed. In the wings sat 12 props for the church's upcoming scripture night: a sack of seed, a brass lamp, a small silver coin, a shepherd's crook, a wedding invitation, a vineyard ledger, 2 little model houses, a wooden pearl box, a fishing net, 3 envelopes marked with different amounts, a clay jar of oil, and a pair of worn sandals. Harriet was 69 years old, retired drama teacher, widow, church volunteer, keeper of stage keys, and a woman who could make teenagers project their voices across an auditorium, but had never managed to make her own prayers sound brave. She had agreed to direct the church's program because Pastor Wendell said the youth needed living scripture, which usually meant adults doing unpaid labor under spiritual language. The theme was simple: 12 parables of Jesus. The purpose, according to the flyer, was to help people understand the stories Jesus told. Harriet had smiled when she read that. People always thought parables were meant to make truth easier. After 4 weeks of rehearsal, 2 costume arguments, 1 injured cardboard sheep, and a deacon who insisted the Good Samaritan needed a historically accurate donkey, Harriet was no longer sure easy had ever been the point. Her lead actor, Grant Bell, was playing the older brother in the parable of the prodigal son. Grant was 42, polished, successful, handsome in the exhausting way of men who knew which side of their face photographed better, and very generous as long as the program mentioned his company as a sponsor. He had joined the production after donating new stage lights. He said he wanted to serve the message. Harriet suspected he wanted to be seen serving the message. That was not unusual. Churches have always attracted both saints and people who enjoy microphones. The problem was that Grant could not play the older brother honestly, because he did not think the older brother was wrong. He stayed, Grant said during rehearsal, standing outside the fake door of the painted farmhouse set. He worked, he obeyed. Then the irresponsible one gets music and meat. I understand the theology, but emotionally, the father is rewarding chaos. From the back row, a voice said, maybe the older brother liked the field more than the father. Everyone turned. The man in the back row had slipped in during rehearsal and sat under the broken aisle light. He wore a gray coat, too thin for the season, carried a canvas bag, and had a beard that made his age difficult to guess. His name was Wesley Reed. Harriet knew him only because he sometimes slept near the theater alley when the shelter was full. He had once been a carpenter, someone said, or a music teacher, or a drunk. Small towns collect stories about people they do not want to know closely. Harriet had brought in coffee twice and felt charitable afterward, which was not the same as love. Grant frowned. Excuse me. Wesley lifted both hands. I just mean the father came outside for him too. The room went quiet. Harriet looked at the fake door. It had jammed again, trapping the stage manager inside the farmhouse set, while the actor playing the prodigal waited with a pig slop bucket and deep emotional confusion. Harriet held the script, then slowly closed it. That was the first parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand. The prodigal son is not only about the lost person who runs away, but also about the religious person who refuses to come inside when mercy celebrates someone else. Most people understand the younger son's rebellion. He takes the inheritance, wastes it, breaks his life, and comes home hungry. But Jesus also leaves the older son outside the feast, respectable, angry, obedient in labor but distant in heart. The father goes out to both sons. One is covered in shame, the other is covered in superiority. Both need grace. Harriet had directed the scene for weeks, as if the emotional center was the runaway returning. But Wesley's sentence exposed the hidden question. What if the person most in danger is not always the one smelling like pigs? What if it is the one standing outside with clean hands, refusing joy because grace did not ask his permission? Grant said, "So you think obedience doesn't matter?" Wesley shook his head. "No, I think if obedience makes you hate mercy, something has gone wrong." Harriet felt the sentence strike harder than it should have. She had been faithful for years. Church committees, meals after funerals, youth plays, Christmas programs, hospital visits, lesson plans, budget meetings. She had stayed in the field after others left, but lately, when new people came in messy, dramatic, emotional, late, needy or loud with fresh repentance, something in her tightened. She wanted them helped, certainly, but quietly, without disrupting those who had kept everything running. She had not said this aloud. The older brother rarely needs lines. Silence performs enough. The fake door popped open at last, and the stage manager stumbled out, covered in dust. "I think the hinge is warped," she said. Wesley murmured, "A lot of doors are." Harriet looked at him. "Do you want to help us fix it?" Grant's eyebrows rose. Wesley looked surprised too. "Me?" you commented. "Now you are crew." He stood slowly. "That is a dangerous ministry model. It has served theater for centuries." He walked down the aisle, climbed the stage steps, and examined the hinge. His hands changed when he touched wood. They became confident, careful, remembering. Harriet noticed. Grant noticed too, and disliked noticing. Wesley removed one screw, adjusted the hinge, and the door swung smoothly. The feast could happen. That felt too obvious, and therefore exactly like a parable. On the prop table, the sack of seed tipped over and spilled across the floor. Millet, wheat, and barley scattered into cracks between stage boards. A girl from the youth group groaned. "Now we have to sweep everything." Harriet looked at the seed. Not yet. The second parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the parable of the sower. The issue is not only how widely the seed is thrown, but what kind of soil the heart has become. Jesus described seed falling on the path, on rocky ground, among thorns, and on good soil. Many hear the word, not all receive it the same way. The path is hard. The rocky soil receives quickly, but has no root. The thorny ground lets worries, riches, and desires choke the word. The good soil hears, understands, holds fast, and bears fruit. People often ask why the sower wastes seed, but the parable asks a more dangerous question. What has been walking over your heart until it became a path? What stones have you refused to remove? What thorns have you allowed because they looked like normal adult concerns? Harriet knelt and picked up a few seeds from the floor. She thought of her own heart. Not hard exactly, not dead, but crowded. Thorns of responsibility, thorns of resentment, thorns of being useful, thorns of private grief she had never let God touch, because grief had become part of her authority. Her husband, Malcolm, had died 3 years earlier. People still praised how strong she had been. Strength can become a thorn when everyone admires it. Grant crossed his arms. "Are we sweeping or meditating?" "Both," Harriet said. "Good theater requires clean floors and convicted souls." Wesley smiled faintly. The youth group began gathering seed. Some seeds had rolled under the front row. A boy named Peter tried to retrieve them with the shepherd's crook and knocked over the brass lamp. The lamp clanged against the stage floor, and its little glass chimney rolled toward the aisle. A woman in the second row gasped. It was Mrs. Fallon, chair of hospitality, who had come to watch rehearsal and judge the snacks. "Careful, that lamp is from the church display case." Harriet picked it up. "Is it valuable?" Mrs. Fallon said. "It belonged to Reverend Bell's mother." Grant cleared his throat. My grandmother. Of course it did. In church life, every object eventually belongs to someone's grandmother. The lamp was brass, darkened with age, beautiful but unlit. Harriet held it near the stage light and saw dust inside the glass. The third parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the lamp under a basket. Light is not given, so it can be admired in storage, but so it can reveal what darkness once hidden. Jesus said no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bowl or under a bed. Instead, it is placed on a stand so those who enter may see the light. People often make this parable about being visible, influential, bold, noticed. But Jesus was not calling his people to perform brightness. He was warning against covered light. Truth received but hidden. Mercy known but withheld. Conviction felt but silenced. Gifts preserved but unused. A testimony locked in a display case because everyone respects the past more than they obey the present. Harriet looked at the dusty lamp. Has this ever been lit? Grant said, it is an heirloom. That was not my question. Mrs. Fallon looked offended on behalf of ancestors. Wesley said quietly, some lamps get protected from the very thing they were made to do. Harriet did not answer because she was tired of Wesley being right from the back of the room. She set the lamp on the stand near the fake farmhouse door. We light it in the scene, Grant said. With real flame, with a small stage, safe bulb, calm down. I am not burning your lineage. The youth laughed. Grant did not, but the lamp on the stand changed the stage. The farmhouse looked less like a set and more like a place someone might come home to. If this is already making you think of a truth God gave you that you have kept hidden under fear, reputation, or comfort, pause here. Like this video, subscribe, and write in the comments. Let the light be seen. Let that be your confession today, Lord. Do not let me preserve what you meant to shine. They rehearsed the sower scene next. The students were supposed to move across the stage as different soils while the narrator spoke. It should have been simple. It became chaos because one student interpreted thorny ground as interpretive dance and nearly took out a microphone stand. Harriet stopped them. The point is not to become shrubbery. The point is to show a crowded heart. Grant checked his watch. Wesley sat near the prop table, repairing a loose handle on the wooden pearl box without being asked. Harriet watched his hands again. You said you were a carpenter. He did not look up. Once. Still are, apparently. Hands remember what a life forgets. That sentence sat on the stage like another prop. Harriet wondered how much of Wesley's life had been broken by choices, how much by sorrow, how much by people who saw only the outside and walked past. The fourth parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the lost sheep. The shepherd's search reveals the value of the one, not the irresponsibility of the 99. Many people hear the parable and argue with the math. Why leave 99 for one? Is that efficient? Is that fair? But Jesus was speaking to Pharisees and teachers of the law who were offended that he welcomed sinners and ate with them. The shepherd goes after the lost sheep until he finds it. He carries it home rejoicing. Heaven rejoices over one sinner who repents. The parable does not teach that the 99 are worthless. It teaches that the one is not disposable. Mrs. Fallon whispered to another woman, I still think leaving 99 sounds reckless. Wesley heard. Unless you are the one. Silence again. Harriet looked at the shepherd's crook on the prop table. It had been made from lightweight plastic, painted brown to look sturdy. Theater loved pretending weak things were strong. The church did too sometimes. She picked it up. We need this scene to feel like search, not lecture. The boy playing the shepherd said, How do I search convincingly? Harriet said, Imagine someone you love is missing and everyone else says they are not worth the trouble. The boy's face changed. Oh, he walked the stage differently after that. Grant watched from the side, uncomfortable. The problem, he said, is some people keep getting lost. Harriet turned. Yes, so where is the accountability? Wesley stopped repairing the box. Maybe being carried home is not the same as being told the cliff was wise. Harriet pointed at him. You, Keep that sentence. Grant looked irritated. Do you have an answer for everything? Wesley's face hardened for the first time. No. That is how I ended up needing many of them. The room felt the shift. There was a history there. A cliff. A search. Maybe people had searched for Wesley once. Maybe they had stopped. Maybe he had wanted them to. Parables are dangerous because they make everyone present. The fifth parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the lost coin. God's search is not only for the openly rebellious, but also for what has been lost inside the house. A woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. She lights a lamp, sweeps the house, searches carefully until she finds it, then calls friends and neighbors to rejoice. The coin did not run away, did not waste inheritance. It did not choose the far country. It was lost at home. Some people are lost in pews, families, kitchens, marriages, ministries, routines, respectable habits, and familiar rooms. They have not left the house, but they are still missing from joy. Harriet lifted the small silver coin from the prop table. It had been bought online in a pack of biblical-looking props that were made somewhere nowhere near Galilee. Still, under the stage light, it looked real enough. She rolled it across her palm and thought of herself again. Had she been lost in the house? Present at church, present at rehearsal, present at funerals, present at planning meetings, present everywhere except before God, with an undefended heart. Mrs. Fallon said, "This parable is why we dust under communion tables." Harriet said, "No, but please continue doing that." Wesley laughed softly. Grant did not. He was staring at the coin. "My father preached that one," he said. Harriet remembered Reverend Bell. Strong voice, strong opinions, strong expectations. His portrait hung in the church hallway near the display case where the lamp had been kept. Grant had grown up under sermons, handshakes, church campaigns, building drives, and public approval. People assumed children of respected leaders understand grace. Often they only understand being watched. "What did he say?" Harriet asked. Grant shrugged. "That lost things should be found, and that if the church loses something valuable, it should sweep until it finds it." He looked at Wesley, then away. "Then people are lost because no one wanted to move furniture." That was the first time Grant sounded less polished. Harriet let the moment breathe. Good lines do not need immediate decoration. The sixth parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the Good Samaritan. The neighbor is not the person who shares your label, but the person who lets mercy interrupt the road. A man is beaten and left half dead. A priest passes by. A Levite passes by. A Samaritan, despised by the audience Jesus was addressing, stops, binds wounds, pours oil and wine, places the man on his animal, pays for his care, and promises more. People love this parable until they realize Jesus made the outsider the example. The question was, who is my neighbor? Jesus turned it around. Who acted as neighbor? The parable does not let us define love by category. It defines love by costly mercy. At rehearsal, the student playing the priest kept walking too slowly past the wounded man, as if hoping the audience would know he felt bad. Harriet stopped him. "Do not make him sympathetic too quickly." "But he probably had reasons," the student said. "Yes, that is the danger. Reasons can step over a body." Wesley looked down at his hands. Mrs. Fallon looked toward him, then away. Harriet felt the room understand without anyone saying it. How many people had passed Wesley on Main Street with good reasons? Safety, busyness, uncertainty. He might use money badly. Someone else should help. The shelter exists. I have children with me. I do not know what to say. Reasons can step over a body. Grant spoke quietly. "My company renovated the shelter kitchen last year." Harriet nodded. "That was good." He looked almost defensive. "We donated a lot," Wesley said, not unkindly. "Did you ever eat there?" Grant stiffened. "What? Nothing. But it was not nothing. Donating to a road is not the same as stopping on it." Harriet saw Grant receive the wound and resist it. She knew that face. Conviction knocking, pride holding the latch. seventh parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the rich fool. The tragedy is not that he had barns, but that his abundance made him speak only to himself. The ground of a rich man produced plenty. He said to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and I will say to myself, you have plenty laid up. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." People often hear this parable as a warning against wealth, and it is. But the deeper horror is isolation from God and neighbor. The man's conversation is with himself. My crops, my barns, my grain, my goods, my soul. No gratitude, no generosity, no awareness that life is on loan. He is not condemned for having a harvest. He is condemned for letting harvest become a closed circle. Grant had gone still. Harriet looked at him. "We need someone to play the rich fool." The room became too quiet. Everyone knew who looked the part, which was unfair and obvious. Grant smiled thinly. "Subtle," Harriet said. "You have range." He looked at the script. Fine. He performed the monologue well. Too well at first. He made the rich man charming, strategic, visionary. The students laughed. Harriet stopped him. "No." Grant lowered the script. "What? He is not pitching a business expansion. That is what he is doing. No. He is revealing a soul with no room for anyone else." Grant's jaw tightened. "You want him colder. I want him emptier." The word hit. Grant looked down. Then he tried again. This time the speech sounded lonelier. "My barns, my grain, my goods, my soul." By the end, even he looked uncomfortable. Wesley watched from the side, expression unreadable. If this parable is exposing a place where your blessings have become barns instead of bread for others, do not brush it off. Subscribe. Keep walking through the teachings of Jesus with us, and write in the comments. Make room for mercy. Let that be your prayer, Lord. Do not let my abundance become a locked room where only my own voice is heard. During break, Harriet found Grant outside under the theater awning, looking at his phone but not reading it. Rain had begun, soft and steady. Across the alley, Wesley sat on an overturned crate eating a sandwich one of the students had brought him. Grant watched him. "My father used to invite men from the shelter to Sunday lunch," Grant said suddenly. "My mother hated it, not openly, but the good plates disappeared when they came." Harriet stood beside him. "What did you think?" "I thought he was trying too hard to be holy." He swallowed. "Maybe I hated that he seemed more relaxed with them than with me." There it was. Not arrogance only, hunger. The older brother outside the feast. The son of a preacher who thought being useful was the same as being loved. Harriet said, "Parables have a way of walking behind our lines." Grant laughed without humor. "I donated the lights so people would know I still care about the church." "Do you?" "I don't know. I care what they think." He put his phone away. "That is not the same." "No, do not sound so pleased." "I am not pleased. I am hopeful." He looked through the rain at Wesley. "What do I do with him?" Harriet almost said, "Help him." Instead, she said, "Ask his name as if you expect to remember it." Grant looked annoyed because the answer was small enough to be possible. Small obedience often offends more than grand ideals. Back inside, rehearsal moved to the parable of the wise and foolish builders. The youth had made two model houses, one on a stone base, one on sand in a shallow tray. The sandy one kept collapsing before the storm sound effect, which made the parable efficient but visually premature. The eighth parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the wise and foolish builders. The foundation is not what people admire before the storm, but what remains after obedience is tested. One man builds on rock, another builds on sand. Rain comes, streams rise, winds blow. The house on rock stands, the house on sand falls with a great crash. Jesus said, "The wise builder is the person who hears his words and puts them into practice, not hears only, not admires, not studies, not quotes. Obeys. The difference between the houses may not be obvious in calm weather. Both may look finished. Both may have windows, doors, paint, and complements. The storm reveals the foundation. Harriet watched the model house fall into sand. She thought of her own house after Malcolm died. People said her faith was strong because she kept showing up. But sometimes showing up had been sand-painted like rock. She had heard the words of Jesus for decades. Forgive, pray, welcome, seek first the kingdom, love your enemy. Do not judge by appearance. Give secretly. Come to me. But she had also built hidden rooms on control, reputation, usefulness, and quiet bitterness. The storm had not destroyed her faith, it had revealed where she had decorated sand. A student asked, "How do you know what you built on before the storm?" Wesley, still near the proc table, said, "Listen to what you panic about losing." No one spoke. Harriet said, "That is going in the program whether you like it or not." Wesley shook his head. "Please don't." "Fine, then it is going in my sermon notes." "You preach?" "No, but I threaten." The ninth parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the pearl of great price. The kingdom of heaven is not an accessory added to an already full life. It is the treasure that makes selling everything else sane. A merchant found one pearl of great value. He went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. Many people imagine the kingdom as one more good thing among good things: family, career, comfort, faith, reputation, retirement, hobbies, and Jesus somewhere shining politely in the box. But the parable says the kingdom is worth everything because it is not one treasure among many. It is the treasure that reveals the true value of all others. Harriet opened the wooden pearl box Wesley had repaired. Inside was a large imitation pearl, absurdly shiny. It looked fake, but under the stage light it still drew the eye. She held it up. The actor must not look sad to sell everything. A girl asked, "Why not?" "Because he has found the pearl." Grant, standing nearby, said, "Selling everything still sounds terrifying." "Yes," Harriet said, "joy can be terrifying when it asks for your backup plans." Wesley looked at the pearl. "Some of us sell everything for things that cannot save us. Then, when the real treasure appears, we think we are too poor to buy it." Harriet looked at him carefully. "Are we still talking about the parable?" "Yes," he said. Unfortunately, there was more history there. Harriet wanted to ask. She did not. Curiosity is not always compassion. Sometimes it only wants details to feel close without becoming responsible. The 10th parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the talents. Faithfulness is not measured by equal outcomes, but by trusting the master enough to risk what he entrusted. A man going on a journey gave talents to his servants, to one 5, to another 2, to another 1, each according to ability. The first 2 invested and multiplied what was given. The last buried his talent in the ground because he feared the master. People often make this parable about productivity, success, or using skills, but at its root, it reveals what each servant believes about the master. The fearful servant says, "I knew you were a hard man." His view of the master makes him bury what was entrusted. A distorted view of God buries many lives. Harriet held up the 3 envelopes from the prop table. This scene is not about comparing envelopes. The students nodded with the solemn confusion of people pretending to understand. She continued, "The question is, do you trust the giver enough to use what he gave?" That landed in herself again. She had buried parts of her life after Malcolm died. Not all. Enough. She had buried singing because it hurt. Buried hospitality because empty chairs accused her. Buried risk because losing one love made new attachment feel irresponsible. She had told herself she was being wise. Perhaps she had been afraid of a hard master. A God who takes, a God who asks, a God who might let another beloved thing die. The parable exposed not laziness, but suspicion. Grant said quietly, "What if you already buried it?" Wesley answered before Harriet could. "Dig." The room turned to him. He looked embarrassed. That came out too simple. Harriet shook her head. No. Simple is sometimes what truth wears after we run out of hiding places. The 11th parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the 10 virgins. Readiness is not borrowed at the last minute from people who cultivated oil in secret. 10 virgins waited for the bridegroom. 5 were wise and brought oil. 5 were foolish and brought lamps without enough oil. When the bridegroom came at midnight, the foolish asked the wise for oil, but readiness could not be transferred. The door shut. People hear this parable and get distracted by details, but its force is clear. There is a kind of spiritual preparedness no one else can do for you. Your grandmother's faith cannot fill your lamp. Your church's activity cannot fill your lamp. Your church's activity cannot fill your lamp. Your spouse's prayers cannot fill your lamp. Your public role cannot fill your lamp. There is oil cultivated in hidden obedience, watchfulness, repentance, prayer, and real communion with Christ. Mrs. Fallon touched the old brass lamp on the stand. That one stings. Harriet looked at her. Good. I don't like when you direct spiritually. I don't like when Jesus tells parables personally, but here we are. Grant sat on the edge of the stage, suddenly tired. My father had oil, he said. That's what people said. Reverend Bell has oil on his life. They said it, like I should inherit it. Did you believe you could? Harriet asked. I hoped I could. Without wanting what he wanted. He looked toward Wesley, without loving who he loved. Wesley did not move. Grant rubbed his face. I think I have been carrying a lamp with my father's name on it, and no flame. No one rushed to comfort him. That would have cheapened the confession. Harriet simply said, then ask the Lord for oil, before the door is the only sound left. If this is touching a place where you have been borrowing the appearance of faith without cultivating oil in secret, do not wait until midnight. Like this video, subscribe, and write in the comments, fill my lamp. Let that be your prayer today, Jesus. Make me ready in the places no audience can see. The last scene was supposed to be the parable of the great banquet. Harriet had placed the wedding invitation on the prop table all afternoon without looking at it closely. It was cream-colored, with gold letters and a torn corner. The youth playing the servant was to invite guests, hear excuses, then bring in the poor, crippled, blind, and lame from the streets. It was a strong scene. Too strong, perhaps, for a church program where everyone expected refreshments afterward. The 12th parable of Jesus that reveals what most people never understand is the great banquet. The danger is not that people are not invited, but that they are too occupied to want the feast. A man prepared a great banquet and invited many guests. When everything was ready, they made excuses. A field, oxen, a marriage. None of these were evil things. That is the terror. Ordinary responsibilities can become refusals when they matter more than the invitation of God. The host then sent his servant to bring in the poor, crippled, blind, and lame, and still there was room. The kingdom feast fills with people who know they are needy, while the self-satisfied miss joy because their lives are too full to receive it. Harriet looked at the invitation. The gold lettering read, "Everything is now ready." Under it, in tiny print, someone had written by hand, "Still there is room." She did not know who wrote it. Maybe one of the students, maybe Wesley, maybe herself, and forgot. That was how conviction felt sometimes, like handwriting you recognized only after it accused you. Grant stood near the stage door looking at Wesley. "Mr. Reed." Wesley looked up, surprised by the formality. Grant walked toward him. "Wesley, would you sit with me during the performance Friday night?" Harriet pretended to check the script. Every person in the room pretended something. Wesley said, "In the audience, yes. I am not exactly on the donor list. No." Grant swallowed. Neither were most people Jesus liked eating with, apparently. Wesley studied him. "Is this charity or repentance?" Grant winced. "I am hoping the second. I'm afraid it looks like the first. That is at least honest." Grant nodded toward the stage. "After rehearsal, I was going to buy dinner. You can come if you want." Wesley did not answer quickly. That was wise. Invitations from guilty people can sometimes be more about their relief than your dignity. Finally, Wesley said, "I'll come if we eat somewhere you do not need to be seen." Grant almost laughed, then realized the mercy in that boundary. Deal. Harriet felt something loosen in the room, not because one dinner fixed anything. It did not, but a door had opened from the inside this time. The rehearsal ended late. Students gathered costumes. Mrs. Fallon collected snack trays. Pastor Wendell arrived at the exact moment the hard work was over, which Harriet considered a spiritual gift of timing. He looked around at the repaired door, the lit lamp, the seed swept into a jar, the shepherd's crook, the pearl box, the invitations, Grant and Wesley speaking quietly near the aisle. "How did rehearsal go?" he asked. Harriet looked at the 12 props. "The parables rehearsed us." He smiled. "That sounds dangerous." It was. "Good." Harriet stayed after everyone left. The theater emptied into creaks and shadows. Rain tapped the roof. On stage, the brass lamp glowed softly from its hidden bulb. The fake farmhouse door stood open. The jar of gathered seeds sat beside it. The pearl box was closed. The coin lay on the table. The model house on sand had collapsed again. She did not fix it. Some ruins should preach. She sat in the front row and opened her Bible to Matthew 13, where the disciples asked Jesus why he spoke in parables. Harriet had always loved parables because they were vivid. Farmers, sons, coins, lamps, builders, bridesmaids, servants, banquets, seeds, nets, pearls, sheep, ordinary things. But that night, she saw the danger. Parables do not merely explain truth. They reveal the listener. They draw the humble closer and leave the proud arguing about the furniture. They make the hearer choose where they stand, inside or outside the feast, path or good soil, lampstand or basket, neighbor or passerby, builder on rock or decorator of sand, ready or unready, invited or excusing themselves. What most people never understand is that Jesus did not tell parables so we could admire moral lessons from a safe distance. He told them so truth could walk into ordinary rooms wearing familiar clothes and find out whether we wanted God or only religious ideas about God. A parable is a mirror with a story on it. You lean in to see the farmer, the sheep, the coin, the son, the Samaritan, the fool, the builder, the pearl, the servant, the bridesmaid, the banquet. Then suddenly you see yourself. Harriet whispered, "Lord, where am I outside the feast?" The question scared her more than she expected. So she waited, not for a voice from the rafters. The theater had enough structural problems without that. She waited in the quiet where truth gathers courage. She thought of Malcolm, of the song she stopped singing, of the dinner table she stopped opening, of the way she had become useful enough that no one asked if she was lonely, of how she liked Wesley better as a symbol than as a man who might need rides, meals, patience, and remembered dignity, of how she judged Grant's performance while hiding her own, of how she had kept the lamp of her faith in a display case, polished by memory, unlit by risk. She took out her phone and called a woman named Anita from church whose husband had died 6 months earlier. Harriet had meant to invite her to dinner for weeks. Later had become one of grief's favorite hiding places. Anita answered sleepily. "Harriet, I know it is late. Is everything all right?" "No," Harriet said, then smiled because the truth felt clean. "But I would like you to come for dinner tomorrow if you are free. Nothing fancy. Soup, bread, possibly overcooked chicken if I become ambitious." There was a pause. Then Anita whispered, "I was hoping someone would ask." Harriet closed her eyes. The banquet had begun with one phone call. Small, unimpressive, a door opening. Friday night came. The theater filled beyond expectation. People stood along the walls. Children sat cross-legged in the aisles until the fire marshal, who was also a tenor in the choir, objected professionally. Grant arrived without a suit jacket, which caused several donors to wonder whether humility had a dress code. Wesley came through the side door wearing a teen shirt Grant had not bought for him because Wesley made clear he would accept dinner before wardrobe management. He sat beside Grant in the third row. Mrs. Biz, Fallon noticed and said nothing, which may have been her greatest act of spiritual growth that week. Harriet stood backstage with the youth, holding the script. "Remember," she whispered, "do not perform the parables like museum pieces. Let them ask questions." A girl dressed as a bridesmaid raised her hand. "What if people don't like the questions? Then Jesus has precedent." The curtain opened. The sower walked across the stage, seed falling on path, rocks, thorns, and good soil. The lamp was lifted to its stand. The shepherd searched until the one sheep was found. The woman swept for the lost coin. The Samaritan stopped on the road, while respectable men passed by. The rich fool spoke to his own soul until the lights went dark. The builders faced the storm. The merchants sold everything for the pearl. The servants opened their envelopes. The bridesmaids waited at midnight. The banquet invitations went out. Excuses were made. The poor were brought in. The prodigal came home. The older brother stood outside. Then the fake door opened. That was not in the original blocking. Grant, from the audience, had asked Harriet to change it. The older brother would stand outside, hearing music. The father would plead. And then, after a long silence, the door would open from the inside, light spilling across the stage. The scene would not show whether he entered. It would only show that the door was open and the feast was still sounding. Harriet had hesitated. "That is not exactly the text," Grant had said. "No, but maybe it is the invitation." Now the audience watched the door open. No one moved. Even the children were still. The actor playing the older brother reached toward the light, then froze as the stage went black. Silence. Then the brass lamp came up alone. Harriet stepped from the side of the stage. She had not planned to speak, then had planned to speak, then had unplanned it, which is how many honest things happen. The parables of Jesus are not soft stories for religious people who already agree, she said. They are doors, seeds, lamps, roads, tables, storms, mirrors. They ask what kind of soil we are. They ask what kind of soil we are. They ask whether we rejoice when the lost are found. They ask whether we pass as womb to give. They ask whether our barns are full and our souls are empty. They ask whether we have built on rock or decorated sand. They ask whether we have oil or only lamps. They ask whether we are too busy to come to the banquet. And they ask whether we will stand outside grace because it welcomes someone we judged. She looked across the room. Her eyes found Grant, Wesley, Mrs. Fallon, Anita, Durand. People who had heard these stories for decades. People hearing them as if for the first. If one of these parables found you tonight, do not rush away from it. Do not turn conviction into polite applause. Let Jesus tell the truth. Let him search the house. Let him break the soil. Let him light the lamp. Let him carry you home. Let him invite you in. Her voice trembled, but it held. If this message is finding you right now, subscribe and keep walking through the words of Jesus with us. And write in the comments, "Open the door." Let that be your prayer, Lord Jesus. Do not let me admire your stories and avoid your voice. Open the door in me that pride, fear, busyness, or bitterness has kept closed. The room stayed quiet for one breath, then another. Then applause came, not thunderous at first, but deep, like people returning from somewhere. After the program, the lobby filled with conversations that did not sound like normal church lobby weather. A businessman admitted to Pastor Wendell that the rich fool scene frightened him. Mrs. Fallon asked Wesley whether he needed help finding work repairing stage sets, then corrected herself and asked whether he wanted to talk about it over lunch. A teenager told his mother he had been pretending to believe because he liked youth group games more than Jesus. She cried and did not scold him, which may have saved the moment. Anita hugged Harriet and said, "Dinner tomorrow?" Harriet said, "Yes, but possibly no chicken." Grant stood near the open farmhouse door on stage, now empty of actors. Wesley walked up beside him. "You left it open," Wesley said. Grant nodded. "I didn't know how to enter yet. That is honest." "Do you?" Wesley looked at the light inside the fake house. Some days I still sit outside the theater, Grant swallowed. Dinner, dinner. They left together, not as a solved story, but as two men walking toward a table neither fully understood. That was enough. Parables rarely end by tying ribbons. They end by asking whether you will go and do likewise. Harriet turned off the stage lights one by one. The lamp remained last. She almost placed it back in the padded box for safekeeping. Then she stopped. Reverend Bell's grandmother had owned it. It had been preserved, admired, dusted. It had shone. It had shone. It had. She carried it to the lobby and set it on a small table near the exit where people would see it when they came in next Sunday for cleanup. Pastor Wendell approached. Mrs. Fallon may object. Mrs. Fallon may grow. He smiled. And if she doesn't, then we will have another parable. He laughed softly and left. Harriet stood alone in the lobby. Rain had stopped. The street outside glistened under the theater marquee. On the sign, someone had placed the title of the program, 12 Parables of Jesus. A few letters flickered, making the word parables look alive and unstable. Good. She thought of the parable of the net, which had not fit into the program the way she first planned, but still pressed on her heart. The kingdom net gathers all kinds of fish, and sorting belongs to the end, not to impatient servants pretending they see perfectly now. She thought of the unforgiving servant too, another parable they had nearly included, with its terrible warning that people forgiven much can still choke others over little. There were more than 12, of course. Jesus had told enough stories to keep exposing human hearts until he returns. Tonight was not completion. It was a beginning. She picked up the jar of gathered seed and poured it into her palm. Some seeds were dusty, some cracked, some whole. She would not throw them away. Tomorrow, perhaps, she would plant them in the narrow strip of dirt behind the theater, where nothing grew except weeds and cigarette filters. It was a foolish place for a garden. That made it suitable for Grace. The next morning, Harriet came back with Anita, Wesley, Grant, 3 students, Mrs. Fallon, and a boy who had played the shepherd but now insisted on bringing actual gardening gloves because searching sheep and planting seeds required different wardrobe. They cleared trash from behind the theater. Wesley built a small frame from scrap wood. Grant hauled soil bags without mentioning sponsorship. Mrs. Fallon brought lemonade and only corrected people twice. Anita planted marigolds. Harriet scattered the saved seed into the dirt, knowing some would not grow, some would be eaten, some choked, some may be fruitful. She found that strangely comforting. The sows sowed. Wesley stood beside her. You know this soil is terrible. Yes, needs work. So do we, he nodded. That may be why I like it. Grant came over, wiping dirt from his hands. I called the shelter director. They need repair work on the back steps. Wesley looked at him carefully. Are you telling me or inviting me? Both. But only if you want. Paid work, not a project for my conscience. Wesley studied him for a long moment. I'll look at the steps. Grant nodded. Thank you. For the work, not the redemption arc. Grant smiled faintly. Understood. Harriet watched them and thought again of the feast. Sometimes the door opens slowly. Sometimes the older brother stands there long enough to hear the music without yet dancing. Sometimes the lost man fixes the hinge. Sometimes the woman sweeping for the coin discovers she herself has been missing inside the house. Sometimes the lamp from the display case lights a lobby. Sometimes a terrible strip of dirt becomes a small field. Weeks later, green shoots appeared behind the theater. Not all the seeds grew. Enough did. Harriet checked them after church one Sunday, still wearing her good shoes and regretting it. Anita stood beside her. Wesley had started repairing the shelter steps. Grant had eaten there twice, awkwardly the first time, less awkwardly the second. Mrs. Fallon had placed the brass lamp in the church lobby with a small card that read, "Light is given to shine." She pretended the idea had been committee. Approved. No one challenged her because growth should be encouraged even when it rewrites minutes. Harriet looked at the shoots breaking the soil and laughed softly. Anita asked, "What? I spent years teaching parables like they were stories to understand. And now?" Harriet touched one green leaf. Now I think they are stories that understand us. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with soup, bread, Anita across from her, and 2 extra chairs left open because she was learning not to let emptiness decide the guest list. Before they ate, Harriet prayed, not long, not polished. Lord Jesus, make my heart good soil. Find what is lost in the house. Light what I have hidden. Carry who I have dismissed. Stop me on the road. Empty my barns into mercy. Build me on your word. Empty my barns into mercy. Build me on your word. Make the kingdom my pearl. Teach me to use what you entrusted. Fill my lamp. Bring me to your banquet, and when I stand outside because grace offended me, come get me again. Anita whispered, Amen. Outside, the theater marquee flickered down the street. Inside, the soup was too salty, the bread was warm, and the empty chairs did not feel like accusation for once. They felt like invitation. And that is what most people never understand about the parables of Jesus. They are not merely simple stories that make spiritual truth easier to remember. They are living invitations that reveal what kind of heart is listening. They expose the hard path, the hidden lamp, the lost coin, the passing priest, the crowded barn, the sandy foundation, the buried talent, the empty lamp, the refused banquet, the angry brother outside the feast. But they also reveal the mercy of the one telling them. The sow still sows, the shepherd still searches, the woman still sweeps, the father still runs, the Samaritan still stops, the king still invites, the master still entrusts, the bridegroom still comes, the treasure is still worth everything, the door is still open. So do not only admire the parables, let them read you, let them disturb the safe places, let them uncover the excuses, let them pull you from the back row into the story Jesus is telling. And if one sentence has reached you today, write in the comments, open the door, subscribe and stay with the words of Christ, because his stories are not finished with us. Somewhere in your life, seed is falling, a lamp is waiting, a coin is missing, a road is wounded, a foundation is being tested, oil is running low, a banquet is ready, and the Father is still standing outside, asking you to come in.